Viktor Lowenfeld is regarded as one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century due to his research and impact he has left in the field of art development. With the publishing of his book, Creative and Mental Growth, Lowenfeld has introduced to the world one of the most concrete and easily understood models of a child's art development. His work on the stages of art development have provided assistance to art educators and therapists, even though some of his work has been contested and criticized. The stages of art development published by Viktor Lowenfeld are the scribble stage, Preschematic stage, schematic stage, dawning realism stage, and the pseudo-naturalistic or period of decision stage. Both art therapists and art educators have used this theory to help them not only the development of the child's art skills, but also the emotional, intellectual, and kinesthetic skills.
Viktor Lowenfeld was born on March 21, 1903 in Austria. Even at a very young age, Lowenfeld was different. He was considered to be a prodigy of both painting and violin, so much so that he even played with the Linz Symphony Orchestra at the age of 12. He was also very involved in his Jewish faith in his adolescence. He eventually graduated from the Art Academy of Vienna, equivalent of a Master of Fine Arts degree, after that receiving his Doctorate of Education at the University of Vienna. However, this was around the late 1930s, and when Hitler rose to power, Lowenfeld and his family moved from Vienna to London, where he published 2 books.
Not long after, Viktor Lowenfeld moved to America, where he started his work towards the stages of art development. Upon arriving, he taught in Massachusetts at a school for the blind and would often lecture at universities like Harvard and Columbia. After doing this, he moved to the Hampton Institute in Virginia, where he worked with black students in a segregated school. This seemed to strike a chord in Lowenfeld, for he would often protest or oppose segregation due to his relatively recent discrimination under Hitler and his Nazi party.
Not only did Lowenfeld sympathize with his black students, but also used them for some research and observation. He found that African American students often drew art related to past experiences and were generally kinesthetically oriented in their work. After his work in Hampton, he moved his career to Penn State University, where he would eventually found the school's first art department, which was the first art department that focused primarily on research.
In 1947, Viktor Lowenfeld published his book, Creative and Mental Growth, which outlines his theories on art development and their impact on the child's overall development. The stages he developed and stated in this book, according to Lowenfeld, were a tool for researchers, educators, and therapists to use to see and define the child's progress in artistic development.
The first stage of Lowenfeld's art development theory is the scribble stage. This is the stage focused on children around the ages of 2 to 4 and is primarily a physical stage. This is the first time a child will manipulate a drawing tool, so they will be experimenting with what can happen. They usually grasp the drawing tool with the whole hand and tend to often look away from their drawings. This stage does help a child develop a sense of focus and increase their attention span. Oftentimes, they will scribble for no other reason than to just move and explore their motions and discover what the tools can do. Scribbles will go from meaningless lines and marks to shapes and purposefully placed objects. The scribbles will go from random to more organized and control images as they progress from one stage to the next. Not only does the stage allow the children to figure out their range of motion and learn about the tools and their own enjoyment, they also learn a very simple fact, whether they are left or right-handed. This stage helps the child with their imagination, independence, hand-eye coordination, finger dexterity, and overall art enjoyment.
The pre-schematic stage occurs from 4 years old to 6 years old. The pre-schematic stage is the appearance of circular images with lines which seem to be a human or animal figure. According to Lowenfeld's stages of artistic development, during this stage the schema, the visual idea, is developed. In this stage, children are beginning to see connections between the shapes that they draw and the physical world around them. Drawings show what the child perceives as most important about the subject. Circles and lines are described as people or objects. They represent the things physically present in the child's life. There is little understanding of space. Objects are placed in an unplanned way throughout the picture. The use of color is more passionate than natural. This stage is when children first begin to make connections to communicating through what they have drawn. The pre-schematic stage provides a concrete record of the child's thinking process. The first attempt is usually a person with a head and 2 vertical lines for legs. Other forms will later develop. Children are always searching for new concepts. This means that symbols are continually changing. The symbols they use depend on the active knowledge while working. When the children are usually drawing, they use themselves as the center of the image. Everything will be based off of them, and nothing nor anyone else can be the main idea of the image. They also have no order. They usually just place things where they think they belong. You can usually motivate a child to draw by using a couple of things. They would be using topics about self, make passive active, and by using body parts. Children also like to use things that are easy for them to use. They will use things such as crayons, clay, large bristle brush, thick tempera paint, and large paper. These things will make it easy for them to express who they are.
The schematic stage begins at age 7 and goes until age 9. During this stage, the child is very clear on how to portray the object so that someone can understand what it is. Also during this stage, children are very aware of the idea of space, and the pictures have a clear skyline and baseline. According to research done at the University of Minnesota, usually the skyline will be a long line of blue at the top of the paper, and the baseline will be a long line of green at the bottom, which is the grass. It is clear what is up and what is down in a picture, and all of the figures are spread out and not overlapping. During this stage, children start to color things the color they would actually be in nature. So instead of coloring a tree pink, they will color the leaves green and the branches brown. According to Analyzing Children's Art by Renee Kellogg, when it comes to drawing humans during this stage, most of the bodies are made up of geometric shapes, and the arm and legs of the person are in the right space on their body. The arms and legs now have volume to them and are no longer just a line. This stage is important because it is a clear reflection of a child's interpretation of their environment. They are recognizing the colors that make up the world and are able to convey that in a drawing. When they are drawing humans, the proportions of the person they are drawing depend on the emotions that child has for the person. The last thing that is very interesting about this stage is something called the X-ray. In an X-ray picture, the person they are drawing can be seen from the outside, but you can also see inside because they didn't fully color in the person's body.
Dawning realism occurs from ages 9 to 11, and this is when we see children begin to be less cooperative with adults, along with becoming more aware of their gender due to their development of self-independence. This stage is also referred to as the gang stage. Lowenfeld found that children within this stage start to draw people with clothes or uniforms and hair while using realistic lines. We can also see a clear difference between how genders are portrayed in their art. More realistic lines and overlapping are characteristics of dawning realism. According to Feinberg, objects typically no longer stand on a baseline and instead start looking more three-dimensional and might include shading or use of subtle color. When children use color, it tends to be more emotional and used from experience. According to Lowenfeld's research, types of pictures children may draw include special careers or activities, group work, and dresses or suits depending on the gender in their work. Materials typically used in dawning realism include cut paper, tempera paint, crayons, mural chalks, clay, paper mache, wood, metal, and printmaking. During this stage, groups of friends of the same sex are typical, along with becoming extremely self-critical. Feinberg stated, the children become aware of their lack of ability to show objects the way they exactly appear in their environment. After this stage, they enter a transition stage that includes a symbolic world where ordering and arranging can take place. When asked, the child will tell their meaning of the picture and the story involved.
According to Analyzing Children's Art by Renee Kellogg, there are two overlapping stages between 12 and 17 years old. The first is the pseudo-naturalistic stage, also known as the age of reasoning. There are set characteristics of this type of drawing. The first is that students are becoming critically aware of their own shortcomings in art, especially if they have trouble with a specific item like an eye or a nose. The age of reasoning is the point at which art activity ceases to be spontaneous and becomes deliberate. It is also during this time that students benefit from having a structured and formalized education in art. If, however, they do not transition from art as a spontaneous form to art as a formalized expression, they will most likely stop doing art. Their visual critique skills lead them to have the ability to see only the flaws rather than the overall form. This period in art making is the first when non-literal meanings and personal emotions begin being applied to an artist's work. The representation of space during the Age of Reasoning is characterized by greater awareness of environment, but still tends to be that only the important elements are drawn in detail. An awareness of depth begins to be shown. There is also a marked attempt with perspective, and the artist also begins to attempt the idea of showing action on a 2D plane. The representation of the human form during this time develops into images with nearly correct proportions. There is also a trend towards a greater awareness of joints and body actions. This Age of Reasoning is when facial expressions begin to vary to show different meanings, and skills like cartooning become very popular. In this stage, humans can be represented by less than a full figure, and the characteristics in the human figure tend to be exaggerated sexual characteristics. During the period categorized as the adolescent art or the period of decision, if further instruction in studio art, drawing, or painting is not available, the artistic development stops and the works tend to resemble the pseudo-naturalistic stage indefinitely. It is during the period of decision when the desire to pursue art is a conscious decision purely to improve artistic skill and to master different media. During this period, drawings begin to show subjective interpretation, where art begins to have a meaning that is deeper than just the image shown. Students that are particularly visually minded begin to enjoy using and looking at visual details, including lighting and shading. The improvement in art during this time is due to the artist's ability to focus on a work of art for an extended period of time. It is also due to the ability the artist has to master different types of media, pen and ink or charcoal for drawing, wheel throwing, or hand building in ceramics. Art during this time also tends to have the beginning of purposeful expression, which is when a piece is made with the expectation that it will have a meaning to viewers. The representation of space during the period of decision continues in rudimentary perspective, although a student that is particularly talented can learn to use more complex forms of perspective, and an acceptance of atmospheric conditions directly begins to inform the artwork. This stage is also emphasized by attention to non-naturalistic representation and stylized forms of representation through manipulation of media, as well as the portrayal of mood and shifting spaces and distortion used for purposeful emphasis. During this period, the representation of human figures varies greatly between artists. For some, naturalistic attempts at creating the human body are made, and there is greater awareness of proportion, action, and visible details. For others, this means the exaggeration of details for emphasis or the imaginative use of figure for satire.
Although Lowenfeld's theory has been favored among educators and therapists alike due to its lack of scope, current educational theories in art favor a more universal approach as opposed to Lowenfeld's Western-centric focus. A study done by the Vermont College at Norwich University questioned the validity of Lowenfeld's theory by testing it among children from other European countries. They found that Lowenfeld's theory did apply to the students. However, the theory was more of a baseline of a child's development. The continued longevity of the popularity of Lowenfeld's theories indicates that art education is not only an interesting field of study, but one that is crucial to the study of child development. The continued longevity of the popularity of Lowenfeld's theories indicates that art education is not only an interesting field of study, but one that is crucial to the study of child development.